I never got to see enough of this guy. In fact, I don't think I could ever see too much of this guy. I went to Australia when I was 12 years old, and naturally, being sort of like into all the gimmicks, and I love the Americana, I became pretty much a number one Hulk Hogan fan. I've got the anthology downstairs, but that's not really who I want to talk about. Who I do want to talk about is the guy who feuded with Hogan right up pretty much until WrestleMania 3, until it all kicked off with Andre. And the build to that feud in many ways was what looked like now, reflecting on it, a test run for how the feud with Andre would run. And that wrestler is probably one of my brother's favourite wrestlers at the time, something that I didn't see as a 12-year-old because I was so into my Hulk Hogan, but it was Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, the one and only Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. I'm taking an opportunity of not just doing something on the creative, but every now and again throwing in some of the wrestlers and the guys that I really liked, and perhaps a few of the wrestlers that I really didn't like from the past. I've asked this question to the Off the Rope show. I've asked this question to Talk Wrestling. I haven't as yet had an answer back, but they're probably wading through all of their answers with 1,000,001 subscribers when I've probably got about 8 or 9, so I've kind of got a little bit more time on my hands. He built what was the friendship, and I didn't know anything of the past history at either WrestleMania 1 or WrestleMania 2. I do now because I've gone back and I know I've watched them. But I came in pretty much fresh, where him and Hogan were very much sort of like brothers in arms. They ate at each other's table, they went to each other's houses, they broke bread, etc., etc., as I think Hogan sort of like put it once. And the friendship, very much so, even though Orndorff was so pumped up and so good at the time, was very believable as number one and number two. And Orndorff getting that gripe inside him that he should be up there and he should be number one. He wrestled in blue trunks, he just had Mr. Wonderful on the back. He was one of these real wrestlers. He didn't really have this cartoon character built around him. He wrestled in the white trunks, which had with red, I believe, on the back with Mr. Wonderful, which was fantastic. The guy was pumped. He could drop an amazing pile driver. His body was exceptional. And when you saw guys go into the ring with Mr. Wonderful, you knew that they'd been worked over. They knew that they were in a match, because Wonderful, if you didn't know what you were doing, could hurt you, but Mr. Wonderful did know what he was doing. He got some of the best matches I've ever seen out of Hulk Hogan. He made King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd look good in tag team wrestling matches when he would side with Hogan. When I've seen him with Rowdy Roddy Piper and all the stuff that happened around WrestleMania 2 and WrestleMania 1, he was simply exceptional as a performer. And I really want to just basically pay a pretty short tribute to Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, who is one of the key reasons, obviously now I can see, why I got into wrestling and why he created something so believable. And like I said, was one of those first guys that was just the wrestler. He didn't have gimmicks and tricks. He was his own gimmick and trick. He was one of the best performers that I've ever seen, and the more matches that I get to see, the more I'm impressed with Mr. Wonderful, and he goes sort of like higher and higher up, sort of like my ladder of like greatest wrestlers of all time. He was a guy that had very rarely, and I'd be interested to know if anybody can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but people often talk about sort of like Piper not getting as many titles as he should have got, and Jake Snake Roberts not getting titles as many as he should have got. And there's several wrestlers, many wrestlers, some would say, in that category, and I feel that Mr. Wonderful is one of those that, for being such a major player and such a major star and such a thrust and push in the company that he created. I understand, I've heard interviews with him, that he's a bit of a wild card and a bit of a loose end and didn't always play to the rules, but probably one of the underrated guys that truly deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Which I know that he is in the Hall of Fame. He went in the class of Hulk Hogan, but this was sort of like my dedication to sort of like one of the guys that I think isn't talked about enough for what he did to the company and should be talked about more. My little section, my 5 minutes of saying how good he was. This was so good that I was very fortunate. My grandparents sent me over 2 4-hour cassette tapes, VHS, presumably completely illegal, at the time of WrestleMania 3, which both myself and my brother absolutely devoured. It was noticeable that he wasn't really present at WrestleMania 3, which was a real crying shame. It's only in the last 2.5, 3 years. I think it was about 3 years ago that I promised myself that I wouldn't do this till my brother came over to Brussels. That I discovered and found where the Saturday main event pay-per-view was, with Hulk Hogan and Mr. Wonderful's match, where he nearly won the title, but he didn't win the title, and he had Bobby the Brain again, sort of like Bobby the Brain Heenan in his corner. And what a great match that was! The steel cage match that he had with Hogan, and what a great match that was. Um, Anybody got any more matches that they think that maybe I might not have seen? Please let me know, because I'd love to see more and more of Mr. Wonderful. This was my opportunity and chance to say I'm interested in doing the creative stuff. I'm going to stick to the fact that I'm not really doing that much reviews. I think, like I've said before, you can go to the other channels that you want to see those reviews for. But this is my opportunity to sort of like slightly deflect and add something else in the wrestling area. So this is my hats off. Ironically enough, I ain't got a hat on, but this is my hats off to Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, and this is my chance to say to him and to the whole of the wrestling community on the internet, what an amazing, fantastic performer that he was. I miss him, and talking in my last post about sort of like the managers, what a pop that would be if he came back as the manager of, say, Cody Rhodes. This is the Stone Cold Stevie C, signing off.